Unstoppable. Turning obstacles into stepping stones, life, in its intricate design, never promised a smooth journey. What it did promise, however, was growth, a constant evolution that stems not from the ease of our path, but from the challenges that punctuate it. Consider for a moment the diamond, one of nature's most precious creations. It does not emerge in its brilliant form without first enduring immense pressure beneath the Earth's surface. Similarly, our greatest potential remains dormant until we face the pressures of life's obstacles. Every significant figure in history, from Einstein to Oprah, from Gandhi to Gates, shares a common narrative: the transformation of seemingly insurmountable obstacles into the very foundations of their success. What sets these individuals apart isn't an absence of challenges, but rather their perception of them. Where others saw roadblocks, they recognized stepping stones. What if I told you that obstacles are illusory, not in their existence, but in their perceived power over us? The first step to becoming unstoppable is dismantling the false narrative we've constructed around challenges. Most people view obstacles as interruptions to their journey, unwelcome intrusions that delay their arrival at some desired destination. This perspective creates a psychological resistance that magnifies the obstacle's difficulty and diminishes our capacity to overcome it. It's akin to swimming against a current. The more you fight it, the more exhausted you become. Instead, consider obstacles as integral parts of the journey itself, not detours, but rather the actual path. When you embrace this shift, something remarkable happens. The obstacle loses its power to intimidate. It transforms from an adversary into a teacher. Take Sarah, a client of mine who had been laid off after 15 years at a prominent marketing firm. Initially, she perceived this as a catastrophic obstacle, a career death sentence at age 45. But through our work together, she began to recognize this apparent obstacle as an opportunity to pursue the entrepreneurial venture she had postponed for years. Today, her consulting business generates triple her previous salary. And more importantly, she reports a level of fulfillment she had never experienced before. The obstacle hadn't changed. Her relationship with it had. This isn't merely motivational rhetoric. Science substantiates this approach. Neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, allows us to rewire our response to obstacles. When we repeatedly approach challenges with a growth mindset, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with resilience. Over time, this becomes our default response. Conversely, when we consistently view obstacles as insurmountable barriers, we reinforce neural pathways associated with defeat and helplessness. Research from Stanford University demonstrates that individuals who view challenges as opportunities for growth maintain higher levels of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward, when facing difficulties. This biological advantage gives them a tangible edge in perseverance and creative problem solving. You're not just changing your thoughts. You're literally reshaping your brain. Every obstacle carries within it a hidden message, a lesson specifically designed for your growth. The art lies in deciphering this message rather than becoming distracted by the obstacle's immediate discomfort. Consider this framework for extracting wisdom from your challenges. What is the immediate problem you're facing? What deeper issue might this be highlighting? What quality or skill is this obstacle inviting you to develop? What can you learn that will prevent similar obstacles? Let me illustrate with an example. James, an executive coaching client, faced a significant obstacle when his company's major product launch failed spectacularly. The surface challenge was clear: a failed launch with financial implications. But through reflection, he identified the core challenge: inadequate market research and an unwillingness to incorporate critical feedback. The growth invitation was to develop intellectual humility and more robust testing protocols. The future prevention strategy involved instituting regular external reviews and creating psychological safety for team members to voice concerns. By decoding the obstacle's message, James not only recovered from the setback, but implemented changes that led to the most successful product launch in the company's history 18 months later. We instinctively resist constraints, viewing them as limitations that restrict our potential. Yet history reveals a paradoxical truth. Constraints often catalyze our greatest innovations and personal breakthroughs. When resources are abundant, creativity often stagnates. Conversely, when resources are constrained, innovation flourishes. Consider how the restrictions of the Apollo 13 mission, where engineers had to design a carbon dioxide filter using only materials available on the spacecraft, led to one of NASA's most ingenious solutions. This principle applies equally to personal growth. The constraints imposed by obstacles force us to develop capabilities that would otherwise remain dormant. The loss of a job necessitates the development of new skills. A health challenge often prompts lifestyle improvements that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. I encourage you to adopt this perspective. How is this constraint actually expanding me? Rather than lamenting the limitations an obstacle imposes, explore how it might be creating space for unprecedented growth. The foundation of an unstoppable mindset is radical ownership, taking complete responsibility for your response to every situation, regardless of fault. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for circumstances beyond your control. It means claiming your power to respond rather than relinquishing it to external factors. The moment you say, "I can't move forward because of this obstacle," you surrender your agency. The unstoppable alternative is, given this obstacle, what's my next move? This subtle shift transforms you from a victim of circumstances to an architect of solutions. It's the difference between waiting for conditions to change and changing your approach to existing conditions. Radical ownership requires honesty about the factors within your control. While you can't control market fluctuations, you can control your preparation, adaptability, and response time. You can't control others' actions, but you can control your boundaries, communication, and chosen environment. The scope of your influence is always larger than you initially perceive. By expanding your circle of ownership, you proportionally expand your capacity to overcome obstacles. Emotions are neither positive nor negative intrinsically. They are informational. Fear signals a perceived threat. Frustration indicates a blocked goal. Sadness reflects a loss. The unstoppable individual practices emotional alchemy, transforming raw emotional responses into constructive energy. This requires 3 steps: naming the emotion without judgment, identifying the information it provides, and channeling the emotional energy productively. For instance, anger, often viewed as destructive, contains tremendous energy that, when redirected, fuels persistence and boundary setting. Anxiety, properly channeled, heightens awareness and preparation. Even despair, when alchemized, can deepen empathy and clarify essential values. Marcus, a former Olympic athlete I worked with, described how he transformed pre-race anxiety from a performance inhibitor to a performance enhancer. Rather than interpreting his racing heart and shallow breathing as signs of weakness, he recognized them as his body's way of preparing for extraordinary exertion. This subtle reframing helped him channel nervous energy into explosive performance. The emotions generated by obstacles are potential fuel for overcoming them, if you master the art of emotional alchemy. Perseverance is often misunderstood as blind persistence, continuing along the same path regardless of results. True perseverance, however, is strategic. It involves persistent commitment to the destination while remaining flexible about the route. Strategic perseverance requires discriminating between these questions. Should I persist with this specific approach? And should I persist with this overall goal? Too often, we abandon worthy goals because of attachment to failing methods. The unstoppable individual separates the what from the how, maintaining commitment to the former while adapting the latter. Thomas Edison's development of the practical light bulb exemplifies this principle. He remained committed to the goal of electric lighting while testing over 10,000 approaches. Had he confused methodology with objective, we might still be reading by candlelight. When facing an obstacle, ask yourself, is it the path that's blocked or the destination that's unattainable? This distinction will guide whether you need to pivot your approach or reconsider your objective. The transmutation of obstacles begins with clear-eyed assessment. Most people either catastrophize obstacles or minimize them. Both distortions impede effective response. Develop the habit of asking, what precisely is the obstacle? What aspects are factual versus interpretative? What resources do I have that are relevant to this challenge? What is this obstacle preventing? And are there alternative routes to that outcome? This clinical evaluation strips the obstacle of its emotional charge and reveals its true dimensions. Often, what appeared insurmountable becomes merely difficult. What seemed impossible becomes challenging but feasible. Elena, a nonprofit founder, faced a devastating funding cut that threatened her organization's survival. Rather than succumbing to panic, she conducted a methodical assessment. She identified which programs were directly affected, distinguished between immediate and long-term impacts, inventoried remaining resources, and explored alternative paths to her mission. This objective assessment revealed that while certain programs would need restructuring, the organization's core mission remained viable through a combination of strategic partnerships and a revised delivery model. What initially appeared to be an existential threat became a catalyst for a more sustainable operational approach. Once you've objectively assessed the obstacle, the next step is to methodically extract the opportunities embedded within it. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about strategic thinking. For every obstacle, systematically explore: what skills might this challenge help me develop? What assumptions might this situation test or invalidate? What new connections or collaborations might this necessitate? How might overcoming this strengthen my position long-term? This extraction process transforms obstacles from pure liabilities into assets with embedded opportunities. The key is specificity. Vague notions about learning from challenges lack practical utility. Instead, identify concrete opportunities with tangible value. When David's small business faced supply chain disruptions during a global crisis, he moved beyond the obvious challenge to extract specific opportunities, developing relationships with local suppliers, creating a more flexible production schedule, and investing in inventory management technology. These extracted opportunities didn't eliminate the obstacle, but they ensured that overcoming it would leave David's business stronger than before, turning a stepping stone out of what could have been merely a stumbling block. With clear assessment and identified opportunities, you can now design a strategic response. This involves creating a comprehensive approach rather than a reactive scramble. An effective strategic response includes primary and contingency plans, resource allocation priorities, a timeline with milestones, feedback mechanisms to evaluate progress, and criteria for potential pivots. This structured approach prevents the common pitfall of abandoning efforts prematurely when initial attempts falter. It also guards against the opposite error: persisting with failing strategies due to sunk cost fallacies. Mia, a technology executive navigating a critical product delay, exemplifies strategic response design. Rather than merely pushing her team harder, she developed a comprehensive strategy, reorganizing teams based on critical path analysis, implementing daily feedback mechanisms to identify emerging blockers, establishing clear criteria for potential future cuts, and creating a transparent communication framework for stakeholders. This strategic approach not only resolved the immediate obstacle, but established protocols that prevented similar delays in future projects, another example of turning an obstacle into a stepping stone for long-term advancement. Even the most brilliant strategy falters without resilient implementation. This final step bridges the gap between planning and achievement, focusing on maintaining momentum despite inevitable setbacks within the larger obstacle. Resilient implementation requires energy management rather than mere time management, celebration of progressive milestones rather than just final outcomes, community support to sustain motivation, and reflection practices to integrate ongoing learnings. The difference between those who ultimately overcome significant obstacles and those who don't often lies not in the quality of their initial strategy, but in their implementation resilience, the capacity to maintain focus and adapt through extended challenges. Carlos, an entrepreneur launching his third startup after 2 failures, demonstrated exceptional implementation resilience. He established strict boundaries between work and recovery time, cultivated a diverse advisory board for emotional and strategic support, implemented weekly reflection sessions to capture learnings, and celebrated small wins to maintain team morale through an extended fundraising challenge. This approach enabled him to sustain effort through a 9-month obstacle that would have defeated his younger self, turning a potential third failure into his first major success. There exists a level beyond merely overcoming obstacles, actively seeking them out. This represents the pinnacle of the unstoppable mindset. Most people organize their lives to minimize challenges. They choose comfort over growth, certainty over potential. The truly unstoppable individual reverses this approach, recognizing that their greatest expansion lies on the other side of voluntary challenges. This doesn't mean manufacturing unnecessary difficulties. Rather, it means selecting challenges aligned with your growth trajectory rather than avoiding challenges altogether. When you find yourself choosing between a comfortable path and a challenging one that offers greater growth, consistently choose the latter. Whether it's pursuing a more demanding project, having a difficult conversation, or testing an untried approach, the deliberate choice of productive obstacles accelerates your development exponentially. Each obstacle you transform into a stepping stone creates two powerful effects. First, you develop specific capabilities relevant to that particular challenge. Second, you strengthen your general obstacle transmutation muscles. The second effect creates a compounding return on investment. Each obstacle you successfully navigate makes you exponentially more equipped for future challenges, not unlike compound interest in financial investments. This compounding effect explains why some individuals seem to achieve exponential growth while others experience only incremental change. It's not that they face fewer obstacles. It's that each obstacle they overcome dramatically increases their capacity to handle the next one. By consistently applying the principles and processes outlined in this book, you create an unstoppable trajectory where obstacles become your accelerants rather than your anchors. As we conclude our journey together, I invite you to embrace a perspective that may initially seem counterintuitive. The quality of your life will be determined not by the absence of obstacles, but by the abundance of meaningful ones. A life devoid of challenges is not only impossible, but undesirable. It would deny you the very conditions necessary for growth, meaning, and fulfillment. The most satisfying achievements are those that require overcoming significant obstacles. The most profound connections are those that weathered relational challenges. The most meaningful contributions are those that solve difficult problems. I encourage you to measure your life not by how smoothly it proceeds, but by how magnificently you transform obstacles into stepping stones, not just for your advancement, but for the benefit of others navigating similar challenges. In embracing this obstacle-rich life, you become truly unstoppable, not because you never fall, but because no fall is final. Not because you never face barriers, but because every barrier becomes a bridge to greater capability. The question before you now is not whether you will face obstacles that is guaranteed. The question is what you will make of them. Will they be the excuse for a life of limitation, or will they be the raw material from which you craft an extraordinary legacy? The choice, as always, is yours. I invite you to take immediate action by identifying your current significant obstacle. Apply the assessment framework to gain objective clarity. Extract 3 specific opportunities within this obstacle using the opportunity extraction process. Design your strategic response, complete with primary and contingency approaches. Establish your implementation resilience system to maintain momentum through the inevitable challenges within the challenge. Finally, connect with a community of like-minded individuals committed to the unstoppable mindset. Share your obstacle transmutation journey and learn from others. Remember, becoming unstoppable is not an event, but a practice one that deepens with each obstacle you transform into a stepping stone. Begin today and watch as the very challenges you once dreaded become the foundation of your most remarkable achievements. Your unstoppable journey starts now.